6 p.m. has arrived. Call to order this regular meeting of the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee. The meeting is being broadcast live on the City Keene YouTube channel and channel 1302. The video is also streamed on the city's website and is posted on the website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Copies of the printed agenda are available in the wall pockets as you enter the meeting room. The public and other city councilors will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. I will not recognize an individual a second time until everyone who wishes has had a chance to speak to the topic. Anyone who wishes to address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room and identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. And written comments from the public will be accepted at the city clerk's office until Tuesday at 1 p.m. Our minute taker participates remotely, so committee members, please be sure to turn on your microphone when speaking. And if the minute taker is unable to hear, we will be made known. So, first item on the agenda is the Yankee Bottle Club.
Hi, my name is Steve Sarachek, and I'm a Keene native, and I am an antique bottle collector, amongst other things. The Yankee Bottle Club has been an organization for about 58 years. Our mission, in a nutshell, is to appreciate, preserve, and promote the history of glass making and collecting in the state of New Hampshire. By 1850, there were some 79 glass manufacturing enterprises in the United States. Personally, I'm most interested in those that were made right here in Keene, New Hampshire. I'm also a fan and collector of Stoddard and Lineborough glass and other glass bottles that were made in the United States as well. I'm here today to inform you of an issue that I and members of the Yankee Bottle Club believe the city at some point needs to come to terms with, and hopefully one day fix. I sent a letter to Mayor Jay Kahn and Councilor Ed Haas, depicting the journey this issue has taken me and to some extent the Yankee Bottle Club. So the letter that I sent to them, I will use them as sort of my trail map for my address to you tonight. About 3 years ago, while walking the dog I've been fostering on the rail trail between Eastern Avenue and Water Street, I came across the 3 historical markers that reside on this stretch of trail. I assume that everyone on the council has read those 3 markers as well. I immediately noticed an unforgivable error regarding our city's industrial past. The 3 markers tell the story of the industries that manufactured goods along Main Street, like CL Brickyard, Wilkins Toy, New Hampshire Mold Granite, the Kingsbury Corporation, Schuyler and Schul, and the J.A. Wright Company, but one industry is glaringly missing, and that is the Marlborough Street Glass Factory, sometimes referred to as the South Factory, that manufactured glass bottles from 1815 to 1842. I'll give you just a little history. In the April of 1814, Lawrence Schoolcraft, a talented glassblower and glass manufacturing superintendent, arrived in Keene with his daughter Katie Ann at the bequest of Timothy Twitchell and other town fathers in Keene to put forth a plan to possibly build a glass factory on Marlborough Street. As Mr. Schoolcraft and his daughter entered Lower Main Street, he made this comment: I arrived in Keene on the 16th instant, and Katie Ann and myself found ourselves in one of the most beautiful country places we've ever been in. The stakeholders, Twitchell et al., had no working knowledge of glass making, but Mr. Schoolcraft was well seasoned in glass making, having been a glass blower and former superintendent of a glass factory in Hamilton, New York. He had a wealth of knowledge with the various aspects of how glassware is produced. Mr. Schoolcraft must have felt Keene was a good place to have a glass factory, because he quickly enticed his son, Henry Rowe Schoolcraft, to run the yet-to-be-built Keene plant. Over the next several months of construction, the factory moved forward as planned, and at some point in October of 1815, the factory was completed and stood ready for production on Marlborough Street. The first glass bottles began to roll out sometime in November of that year, although Mr. Schoolcraft, Henry Rowe Schoolcraft, only ran the factory for 2 years, but in antique glass lore, he is highly thought of. I'm sure every member of the Keene City Council is well versed in Keene's impressive and rich history, and that everyone has a copy as found in our city's historical annal, The History of the Upper Ashuelot. I'm sure everybody has read this from cover to cover. Here, members would find a whole chapter dedicated to Keene glass written by K. Fox, director of the Keene Public Library and an authority on Keene's history. It should be noted that of all the chapters in our historical annal, there's only one industry where a whole chapter is dedicated to it, and that's Keene glass. So I would think it's pretty important. The Fulton Colony Mill, neither the Fulton Colony Mill nor the Kingsbury Corporation have a whole chapter dedicated to it. In order to right a wrong, I set out to find out how historical markers are approved and planted along cities' thoroughfares and who is responsible for undertaking such a task. I started my quest with one of my city councilors, I believe it was Bobby Williams, and he directed me to contact the state commission that deals with historical markers. Eventually, I was in contact with a woman that runs that particular program named Amy Dixon. And historical markers that are on state roads or state highways are the state's responsibility. Historical markers that are on paths or rail trails in a town or city are the responsibility of that town or city. I have personally taken this story to several groups to provide them with a brief history of glass making in Keene and to seek support to finally establish a historical marker long overdue honoring Keene glass. Keene glass shut down 184 years ago, so it's been a while. Over a 2.5 year period plus, I have spoken with the following committees: the Historical District Commission, the Heritage Commission, and the Bicycle Pedestrian Path Advisory Committee. All three of these groups were extremely supportive in having a new historical marker along this stretch of rail trail. It was at one of these meetings that I had the good fortune, as well as the Yankee Bottle Club's fortune, that City Councilor Ed Haas was also a member of the Bicycle Path Pedestrian Advisory Committee group. Upon hearing our quest to establish a historical marker honoring Keene glass, Ed jumped on board and told me he would certainly love to help out. In terms of what the city has in front of them, it seems like it would be a much easier task. I know that you guys have your hands full. Ed has been a boon in the effort by informing the city council of finally honoring Keene Glass by someday making this marker a reality. Ed brought his effort before the full council, whereupon a vote of 12 to 0 in support of a historical marker was cast. Of course, a new historical marker couldn't become a reality without some of the finer points coming into play. In order to create a marker similar in design and fabrication, photographs of the historical markers found along the rail trail between Eastern Ave and Water Street were emailed to Peter Panessa of Signworks. Additionally, a schematic rendering of the markers complete with the markers' physical dimensions were provided to Peter as well. All of this was necessary in order for Peter to estimate the cost. At the time that I provided all this information to Peter, he came up with a price tag of around $3,700, which I think probably is higher now due to the inflationary spiral that we now find our whole country in. Ed advised me also to seek seed money as a good faith effort to show that that we're very much interested in making this historical marker a possibility. The Heritage Commissioner was excited about the prospect of new historical marker, and they have donated, or they will donate, $500 of seed money to make this goal happen. Finally, no historical marker would be complete without a detailed script of the history of Keene Glass, and it was our good fortune that Alan Rumrell provided his expert historical account for this marker. In closing, it is my hope and the Yankee Bottle Club's hope that the city of Keene completes this task. This is not my history. It's not Yankee Bottle Club's history. This is the history of all of Keene. So at this point, I'm also going to contribute $200 to this cause, and I want to thank you for letting me speak about it tonight.
Thank you.
I'll start.
Want to add to, please?
So just to correct the record, this item was brought to the MSFI committee after some meetings at Bike and Pedestrian Pathway, and at that time they were on board with this request and agreed that this would be something that they would help fundraise for. So when it was brought to MSFI, which was the committee that heard this, there was talk about the existing marker, and the state is not interested in moving that existing marker. It's near Fuller Park, so if something needed to happen, it had to be done locally. So MSFI has already approved the placement of this marker and acceptance of this marker as a donation. We are just waiting for the group to raise the funds, create the markers, and then donate them to the city of Keene. That was the motion that was approved last year, and that is also the discussion that was had at the Bike and Pedestrian Path Committee.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Committee, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, City Manager. Question for like other markers that we have in the city or other similar things. Like I think of the is it the toy airplane that's in the right of way? I think off of Main Street. Are those typically funded and then installed in the same manner that was outlined in the MSFI report?
Yes.
Members of the public?
Marker on
Hang on, sir, just a minute.
Excuse me.
Any members of the public wish to speak? Okay, sir, go ahead again.
No, I was just
Oh,
going
I'm
to say
sorry.
that the marker that's the state marker that's next to the rec center is on a state road, and that's why that one is there. This one would be, it would not be on a state road. So,
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Dwight Fisher. I'm a chair of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Path Advisory Committee. My address is 110 Arch Street, number 13 in Keene. I'm just here to reiterate what's already been said now. The committee had heard Mr. Srachek's presentation last fall and had an engaging discussion about the Keene glass in the effort to get this historical marker. The committee endorsed the effort. Historical markers abound on rail lines where manufacturers like Keene Glass once thrived. Historical markers complement Keene's network of rail trails. The committee has no budget, so the cost effort is not within our purview. We did nonetheless encourage Mr. Srachek that a fundraising effort might be the best path forward for this at the time. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Kara Fisk-Hennessy, Parks and Recreation Director. So we do have an existing state marker at Fuller Park that references both major Keene glass factories that were in existence at that time. So when the communications went through with this at the state level, that honors the two different locations within that one historical marker that's been provided by the state. So to reiterate what's already been stated, at MSFI last year and at City Council in the fall, in September of last year, everybody was on board for the Yankee Bottle Club to fundraise, and we would be able to help with the installation. So that's what we landed on as a decision.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to take a vote here, sir, and essentially, we're going to reiterate, and now the finance side has put a stamp on this, and we wish you very well with the fundraising project, and I think you've already got some people standing around ready to contribute. But you're good to go to start fundraising, and it'll get properly planted in the right place when it's ready to go.
okay.
Thank you. A motion, please.
Move to recommend that the City Council confirm that its previous authorization for the Yankee Bottle Club to design, fabricate, donate, and install a historical marker on the Cheshire Rail Trail was granted with the understanding that all project costs would be privately funded through donations and fundraising, and that the city manager be authorized to take all actions necessary to facilitate the installation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion by the committee? Seeing none, all in favor? No one's opposed, it's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 2 is a residential property revitalization zone request.
All right.
Go right
All
ahead.
right, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, members of the committee. I'm here, George Hansel of H.C. Johnson Real Estate, representing to my left Cheryl and Joe Bagster of JCC Rental, NC Rentals, JCNC Rentals. And so we're here requesting that you consider our application for 79E tax relief under the program that's been established by the City Council. And just to give you some background on this project, Joe and Cheryl came to me probably a year ago, somewhere in that time frame, and they had an idea to take one of their existing rental properties, which has 3 sort of small houses on it. It really was like a cottage court before cottage court was a thing. It's been there for a long time. And they wanted to convert an existing kind of barn structure that was just storage on the property into 2 new rental units. And so they wanted to know, how do they do that? I mean, Joe and Cheryl are sort of small to medium-sized developers and property owners. They own 14 or so other residential units throughout the city, and so they're trying to figure out how to help the city meet its shortage of housing and how they can better utilize their property and their existing structure to do that. And so we went through the whole process. We actually got a designation as a cottage court and went through the building permit process, and so they're going, like they're building this, this structure, not building the structure, they're renovating this structure to add those 2 units, and we're hoping to have that done, completed, and occupied in the fall, if everything goes well. And so throughout that process, or part of that process was, I think Joe and Cheryl were doing their own research, and they came across the city's program that you had established for this residential tax relief benefit, and they asked me about it, and I said, I really don't know much about it, and I don't know if you qualify, I don't know if this is the right thing to do or whatever. And they, to their credit, they were persistent about that, and they said, well, you know, go look into it for us, figure it out. And so that's what I did. I kind of went back and forth with staff, and over several months of going back and forth, we sort of got to the point where we felt comfortable moving ahead with this application and putting it in, and maybe helping you all figure out how to administer the program in the process of hopefully providing some tax benefit, some small relief to compensate these developers for their investment of capital in our city and their attempts to solve our housing crisis. So the project is about $200,000, and I just want to put this kind of in context, because I think it needs to be in context, and maybe the city assessor could put it in a finer point on it. But I don't know exactly how this is going to work out, how many years of relief you might be willing to provide, whatever. But my knowledge of it so far gives me the impression that for this addition of 2 units, the investment of $200,000 or so, you're going to get like some kind of benefit in the like $1,500 range a year potentially for this. I know that this is a very difficult thing to put a fine point on and determine right now, because the project isn't completed and the city assessor doesn't know how much the end value is going to be. But you know, my best guess as the applicant, that's kind of what we're going into it and kind of figuring it out. And I think that's important as you deliberate a little bit, because what you're talking about is an overall, say they got the 5 years or whatever, it would be, I think, 3.5% of the project cost is what you're really talking about as like a thank you or a way to sort of make this work. And I can tell you, working on these types of projects all over the state of all kinds of sizes, these types of projects, these conversions of existing buildings at a very small scale, there's not a ton, nobody's making a ton of money on this. This is a hard thing to actually get to pencil out and to work. And I commend these folks for taking on the challenge, and I think what we're requesting is that the city of Keene step up and be a partner in trying to do that. And there are lots of other opportunities throughout the city where I think this could be done, and I see Joe and Cheryl here as sort of trailblazers and trying to make something happen to show other people what they may be able to do with their existing structures. And so just to technically go through our application, we believe it does meet all of the criteria, the structure being at least 40 years old. It has city water and sewer service already. There are 3 built structures that have been there for a long time and people live in them. It does create new housing units, 2 new housing units, so there will be a total of 5 on the property. While there was a question about does it resolve a significant life safety issue on the property, I wouldn't say it does. However, the water and sewer service lines for the existing structures are going to be replaced and updated, I guess, for the existing structures. So that'll add some security for the existing people that live there. I included in the packet, I won't go through every unit and the size of the units and what they are, but I think you could qualify this as workforce housing, and the type of housing that Joe and Cheryl really specialize in is providing kind of high quality, affordable workforce housing for people in the city. Again, the total project cost is about $200,000. It is not a historic structure, even though it is older than the 40 years. And again, we're trying to get it done for this fall so it could be occupied. When it comes to the public benefit portion of the application. It does add a housing unit, which is one of the criteria. And then I also wanted to just point out a couple of the points of how it relates to the master plan, because one of your criteria is to promote efficient design, safety, and a greater sense of community in a manner consistent with the Keene Comprehensive Master Plan. And in preparation for this meeting, I had an opportunity to read the new master plan, which was good, and I picked out several parts of it. I was happy to see that it really did focus on housing quite a bit, and the pillar 1 of the 2025 comp plan, one of the stated objectives is to expand enticing housing options for all, and I think this project accomplishes that. In a different section of the master plan, one of the goals is to boost infill development and redevelopment, and I think this is a perfect example of doing that as well. Also in the master plan, one of the stated goals was to remove barriers for housing development, specifically, and it's specifically listed as an idea, the city-backed financial mechanisms and incentives that are there to creatively leverage and boost housing supply. I think that's exactly what we're talking about here. So by sort of honing in on this program and making sure that it is applicable and available to not just big developers who are doing big projects, but also small developers that are trying to maximize the value of their property, I think you would be accomplishing that goal that's stated in the master plan. And then there's a goal that speaks to, in the flourishing environment section, that really specifically speaks to adaptive reuse of existing buildings. And so that's something that's not on every project. You know, most developers that are looking to build housing are looking to do brand new because frankly it's more predictable, it's easier sometimes to just build a new structure. Taking on an existing structure is a little more difficult. And so as far as the tax relief period, your adopted program allows for up to 5 years of property tax relief on a qualifying structure and then 2 additional years if it adds housing units, which this does. Because there isn't any precedent or any previous project like this for me to really point to, I'm not gonna, it's really the council's program and it's up to them to decide what this project deserves, but all I can say is for the applicants, we want as much as you will allow, I think. And other than that, do you all want to address the committee and say anything? Well, we're all here and happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Community Development Director, do you want to enlighten us a little more on this project?
Sure. Do you want to sit down, Paul?
No, I can do it. I can do it from here. Thank you, Chair. As the applicant mentioned, yes, this program came about the end of last year as part of an ongoing effort by the city to look at its land use codes and zoning to be able to support and encourage infill development, smart planning development, and as such, that's part of the spirit in which we pursued this program and adopted it. I'm going to basically report on what the committee's role is and then go through the checklist that we've done with the 79E program. So the committee's role was to review the application for completeness, evaluate the objective eligibility criteria, and identify where statutory interpretation is required. Because this is the first RPRZ zone application, the committee concluded that establishing the city's interpretation of the RSA is appropriately a policy determination by the city council. Regardless of the committee's recommendation, the statute requires that each application after the determination of completion be brought before the governing body for review and decision. So I don't want to necessarily be redundant here, but we have the property owners of Joe and Cheryl Baxter, property address at 429 Elm Street. This is the adaptive reuse of an existing barn on the property, in addition to an existing house that has 3 units already on the site. The project would convert the barn into a one-bedroom, one-bedroom, and one two-bedroom, resulting in a total of 5 units on the property. And just following along in this checklist, the administrative review, application's complete with all documentation. Any required plans, estimates, or supporting materials are included. Estimated project costs have been provided. The owner has agreed by virtue of the application to the execution and recording of a covenant. The property is not located within a tax increment finance district. Property is not receiving a tax assessment relief under RSA 75-1A, Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. The proposed work is consistent and applicable with zoning and development requirements. And the project supports applicable master plan housing goals, as the applicant mentioned. Going into threshold eligibility, this is where the committee's review of the statute language comes into some areas of debate with respect to what the intent of the program, this particular program under 7090, and what the actual statute says. And so the structure contains an existing residential use, and by that we had to, because the structure is not a residential use, we had to answer no. Project involves work exceeding $50,000 in value, yes. Property is at least 40 years old, yes. It's served by municipal water and sewer, and the property contains no more than 4 existing dwelling units, and we've answered that yes. And the last criteria there is what's missing here is the proposed project involves rehabilitation of an existing residential structure. Residential is not in that sentence and needs to be, and that's where the answer no we had to conclude. And then with the qualifying structure, although this sounds a little bit of a redundant process, but that is actually the piece here that we, as the committee, had to, the statute says the qualifying structure under RSA 79E4B is an existing residential structure, and the barn in and of itself, based on our review and where, as this is the first one that's coming to the city we felt the need to go by the literal language that's in the statute. So, and then as far as public benefit is concerned, there are creation of additional housing units, and it meets the goals of the master plan. Not necessarily within the statute, but not expressly stated in the statute, but other public benefits, as in the applicant mentioned this too, is adaptive reuse of an existing structure. That is a criteria under other parts of 79E, but not necessarily in this section of 79E. It is significant private investment, and it supports our housing goals. So in closing, again, our role was to review the application for completeness, go through the eligibility criteria, and again, based on our review and the fact that we are required, every application that comes in, if it's complete, goes in front of the governing body. We felt it would be appropriately a policy determination for City Council based on our reading of that particular, in this case, that particular about a qualifying structure. And that's my overall view, so I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Starting up here, questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember when we adopted this a year ago, really the spirit of this was to revitalize old buildings, existing buildings, and to get more housing. And on that note, I just want to thank the petitioners for the work that they're doing to help provide more housing in the community. I think this is really helpful. We are, however, bound by state law for when and where we can actually apply these tax incentives and these tax reliefs. And so I do just want to come back to the existing structure, the existing residential or qualifying structure piece here. If I understood correctly, and I think you said this maybe a couple times, that this doesn't meet the qualifying structure as outlined in the RSA. Is that a correct statement, and therefore wouldn't qualify for the
That's
tax
correct.
incentive?
Yeah, sorry, the statute does state structure, it does not state property.
We'll come back to you, George.
No, I was just going to say
Yep.
George. Yeah, that's a, I have to say my own opinion on this is that's an unfortunate requirement. We have many buildings in the city that are not currently residential structures that can be residential structures. So while I have to admit, I'm going to have to get used to the fact of giving tax credits for spending money on a property that you're going to make money on in the future, the purpose of this is to facilitate additional units. And you're taking a building that is not in great shape, that is 1.2 miles from downtown, which means it has excellent proximity to many of the things that people need, and you're reusing it versus incurring additional disturbance to our environment to do new construction. So those, for me, are mitigating factors, and that probably doesn't qualify legally to not be an existing residential unit, creating new residential units. But I have to admit, the proximity to downtown and the adaptive reuse versus new construction and the improvement of another building within our city from not a great building to living units are important, I think, to the community as a whole.
I was reading two things yesterday. One was about the Roosevelt School, and it said this is the first time there's actually been affordable housing built in schools since 2013, in Keene since 2013. We've approved housing up by, on the way to Market Basket, quote unquote. Individual told us that was affordable housing, but that was $495,000, which means you would have to have a household income of about $160,000 to qualify. That is not affordable in Keene. We did some on Wickham Road. That doesn't fall under the affordable one. I looked at Keene housing. In 2024, there was almost 3,000 families on the waiting list. And it comes to the point, leadership can fall back on the letter of the law, or leadership can take the spirit of the law. And in this case, for Keene and the area, I'm going to follow the spirit of the law. And I would much rather have someone say that I'm wrong, but we can benefit the people in Keene, than follow the letter of the law.
George, you had something to add?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just say, my reading of the RSA, I think leaves significant room for you to interpret it either way. Residential structure is not a fully defined term in the RSA. Structure itself is not a fully defined term in the RSA. Like a lot of things, the legislation is imperfect, and it really is up to you all to determine what was the intent. Was the intent to exclude a property that otherwise would have been eligible if there was a little, connection between this building and the building 15 feet away from it? I doubt that. And then also, as city councilors, as you're weighing the benefits to the community versus the letter of the law, it's what is the consequence? What is the consequence? Who's going to be harmed? Who would be harmed by your interpretation that this would be a qualifying structure? And I struggled. I spoke to the community development director, and I said, what is the downside of considering this a qualifying structure? And I didn't get an answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the public? Counselor?
Thank you, Chair. Ed Haas, 114 Jordan Road. I want to thank the applicant for bringing this forward, and I beg their tolerance for working with us through the first time we're doing this. Trailblazers always have that difficulty. The sausage making is difficult, and the sausage eating and slicing may be difficult as well. I want to thank the Community Development Director for doing what we said we would do. Now, trust the committee will interpret it, and the council will interpret it, and we'll go forward from there. But that was what we expect our city staff to do, to read the ordinances and give us their opinion, and then we'll interpret it, and we'll start setting precedent from here going forward. I have a question on this ordinance in particular. If something should go awry over the abatement period, I'm wondering if we have the means to rescind the abatement or change it going forward. I'm not sure if we set it in stone when we put it in place, or it gets reviewed at some time. That's something for you to chew on. Didn't ask the city attorney to think on it before this meeting. I apologize for that. But let's chew on that over the next couple weeks. Thank you.
She's made note. Counselor?
Thank you. Laura Tobin, Center Street. I think this looks like a really exciting project. I did have a question when during the public hearing about the number of units being going from 3 to 5 and how that would work based on the guidelines. I went back and read the ordinance, and I was remembering why we didn't adopt the, so this is section B, and it was section C that is for other structures that are non-residential. And one of the reasons, I think, if I remember correctly, that we didn't adopt that was the income requirements and how that would be difficult to monitor. I wonder if that's worth going back and exploring at some point. And I would also be interested in, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask the applicant how that would work, or kind of exploring that as an avenue. But thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jay Kahn, 17 Mountain View Drive, Keene. So back in 2021, I proposed this legislation. So this is fun to see it come around and actually have an application. The definition of residential structure actually was elsewhere in the statute in New Hampshire law, and was aimed at a residential structure was up to 4 units. I don't think that clarifies the issue that's before you today, but I just thought I'd give you where it's not in this section of the law that it is defined. It was in another section, I think, anyway. Don't make me try to recall. I think key to this, and I'm very interested in what the city assessor might say here, because you can authorize this, but there's no sense in your authorization as to what the benefit is. You can't quantify the benefit on the basis of the action that you'll take tonight. It's really on a post-review of what the increased valuation of the property would be. And then people have played in this statute since 2021 to add additional years for this and that. But key to this is that you've got an existing structure of a enclosed garage with storage, and that has a certain valuation. And then there'll be improvements to this that include bathroom, bedroom, kitchen, and, you know, things that actually add monetary value to the property. And then you've got the decision of how many years will the city award to this, which there's no real guidance that it has to be 5 years. It could be 3. It could be what it, in any case, that precedent is going to be an interesting place to arrive at. I don't think there's real guidance for us as far as that goes, and I think when the city brought in a consultant on that to help us draft the ordinance that we did, that was one of the questions. They did not have a good guidance for us either. Is how do you determine, is everything 5 years because that's the way the statute stated it originally, or is there some place less than? And I think those are the two questions, right? How much is the valuation, and how many years would the benefit, would the abatement last? Anyway, I think the precedent here is what's important for us to consider, given that we want to encourage more applicants to come forward.
Thank you. All right. I think we're up here. Are you willing to say something?
Good evening, Dan Langell, City Assessor. So I did take a look at the value of the property. Now, I do want to caveat that we're in the middle of a revaluation. Values can go anywhere. I'm not about to predict the value of their building, what it's going to be in 4 or 5, whatever years. This is just an estimate to give you guys a ballpark of maybe where this property could be worth. So we do have an estimate of the project cost, about $200,000. That's on top of an existing building. So there's value to that structure now, plus the additional money they're putting in. So you're already looking at, 200 plus for value. If you look at apartment units throughout the city, if you look at the market today, they're selling for an average between 100 and 150 per unit. Again, depending on the size, multiple number of variables, but so even if we take the higher end of that at 150,000 a unit, this is a 2-unit apartment, so that would give us a value of about 300,000. Now, as the applicants have stated, the project has already started to be renovated. So we're going to estimate that at 50% because it really is a shell at this point. So that leaves you a value of about 150,000 for the building that would be deferred. We don't abate it, it actually gets deferred. Well, not deferred, but we just don't account for it for a number of years. So right now, the estimated tax rate during our budget season was about $37 per thousand. Now, we're going through revaluation, so what I did is I applied the equalization ratio to that to bring it down to more of a market level. This is not what your tax rate is. I don't know what it is. But let's say it brings it down to $23 per thousand. That leaves you about $3,500 per year of a benefit. And then depending on how many years, obviously you just keep adding that up. So that gives you a ballpark of what kind of value these owners would benefit from for this.
Questions here? Yes, ma'am.
What am I missing? Because the resolution is very specific. E states that a qualifying project that is deemed by the City Council to provide 1 or 2 of the public benefits listed above may be granted a tax relief period for up to 2 years. We have a project that is providing 1 benefit, correct, out of those criteria? It's not energy efficient, it's not historical, but it's providing additional units. So doesn't that give us guidance that for this project it would be up to 2 years? Or am I missing something?
That question really goes to community development.
Good point. Yeah, it's the resolution itself, and it is under C, and then as you go, no, it's under E. It's in E, just before be it further resolved.
I think that's the full 79E versus
It is.
Versus the residential property revitalization.
It's the preview, I'm sorry. Okay, that's what I'm, okay.
Same church, wrong pew.
Sorry about that.
All right, I think the city attorney wished to address us.
Thank you.
Please.
Since we're talking statutory interpretation, and I went to school for that, I wanted to pipe up. So as far as reading the statute, what has been said is correct on both sides. There's my read of the statute, and looking at what residential structure is, means that the structure that's being worked on is already a residential structure. But it is also correct that there is argument to be made about how surrounding statutes might be informing that read, or maybe what the intent was. Strictly speaking, statutory interpretation, you look at the language unless there's ambiguity. If there's ambiguity, that's where you start looking at those other sources. I don't find it ambiguous. I don't know that that would be successful in court to read in more stuff. So that said, to Council Roberts' points and Mr. Hansel's point, the risk is low if this council decides that it wants to read the statute in that broader way. What is at risk is giving tax relief perhaps to a property that the legislature didn't explicitly intend for it to be. There's not a valve in the statute for someone to come in and sue us for that. There is something called taxpayer standing in the New Hampshire Constitution, but that is narrowed quite a bit through case law, and we don't have any case law on 79E 4B yet and how it's supposed to be used or how it might be challenged. So I wanted to provide that. And then to go back to Councilor Hawes' question really quick, and I may not have fully understood it, but wanted to volunteer this information. There is a provision in 79E, it's in 79E9, about if the tax relief is granted and we have a covenant in place with the property owner, if the terms of that covenant are violated, like if the project's not completed, then this body can basically nullify what was provided or reduce the tax relief.
Thank you. Do you have additional to help us?
I don't know if I have additional information. I'm here for questions, but I was going to just mention that that we have two motions in front of you. I was going to mention that, and the first reflecting what we've presented as our determination that would deny the request, and the second reflects the approval. And I think should you recommend moving forward with approval, there is that mention in the motion of the number of years of relief that would be in there. I believe there's a number in there now. I believe it's 2, but you can, that's your discretion in terms of what you would want to arrive at, should you move in that direction. Just wanted to.
Thank you. All right, it's back to us. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to the city attorney for providing a little bit of insight there. And thanks to Mr. Hansel for his interpretation of the qualifying structure piece as well. I'm thinking back to the presentation that we had received, I guess it would have been last year on this, and I recall one of the intended purposes of this was the rehabilitation of a carriage home, which would be a very, very similar structure to what we're looking at here. And I believe the idea was to create ADUs. So I think this does align with the spirit of what the RSA is trying to accomplish. I did have one more quick question for community development, which is, I did see that we have our qualifying structure wording slightly different than the RSA. Is that intentional, or are we trying to have the same qualifying structure language as the RSA? Not the other two pieces about the $50,000 or needing to be one housing unit, but specifically Section A of our ordinance. Is that intended to match the spirit of the RSA?
It is. It is intended to match the spirit. I should say, I think there's a lot of similarity between, pretty exact similarity between the two, I think, though, and I'm probably not going to answer your question specifically because, again, the intent in the discussions we had the latter part of last year was that this program would, in essence, be able to support a variety of different types of infill and cottagecore type development, ADUs and that sort of thing. But we weren't really in the position to deviate on that specific piece from the state statute.
just really quick, and this may not be helpful, but I've looked at that too, and in 79E2, we have the definitions of qualifying structure, and it lays out definitions for all the other types of 79E programs as well. There is one in there that's for this specific relief, 4B, and it says a 1 or 2 family home or an attached multifamily home with not more than 4 units, blah, blah, blah. And then when you look at 79E 4B is where you get the language of an existing residential structure with not more than 4 units, at least 40 years old. So to answer your question, I believe what our resolution was going for was to bring both those sentences together for in one place for your reference. But those are in the statutes.
All right, we're at decision making. Somebody said carriage house. Were there any horses in this barn? No? Sorry. Yes, sir.
Just basically on reality, when people want to, contractors or developers, their number one priority is profit. It's not about the well-being of who's going to be in there. If it's not going to be profitable, they're not going to build. And so what I'm looking at this, over the last 10 to 15 years, it's been shown it's not profitable to build in structures like they're doing in Manchester or Nashua that would be downtown. And so it may be the mom and pop it's going to add 1 or 2 units at the time. That may be the only way for us to expand places for people to live in Keene.
Thank you. So we have a choice on a couple of motions here. I sense perhaps one is being favored other than another, and it's your turn. So if you'd like to start, and I'm sure we may readjust it before we're done, but
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to make the motion. This will certainly take a minute. I do think we still need to discuss the number of years. I'm going to read the suggestion as a motion in a moment, but that might be a point of discussion that we might want to go to from there. So, with that, bear with me. I'll take a little sip of water first.
That's a lot,
All right. Move to recommend that the structure proposed for redevelopment located at 429 Elm Street is a qualifying structure as defined by RSA 79E4B, that the structure is not within a currently defined tax increment financing district, that the structure is not a residential property subject to an election for tax assessment relief under the low-income housing tax credit program of RSA 75-1A, that the proposed rehabilitation cost estimates exceed the threshold amount of $50,000 and constitute substantial rehabilitation, that the property is served by city water and sewer, that this proposed rehabilitation is consistent with the city's master plan, and that the proposed rehabilitation provides the following public benefits as required by Resolution R 2025-35. 1, it adds at least 1 unit of new housing. 2, it promotes a efficient design, safety, and a greater sense of community in a manner consistent with the Keene Comprehensive Master Plan. Therefore, the committee recommends that the application for real property tax relief on any assessed tax increment resulting from the substantial rehabilitation of the qualifying structure be granted for a period of 2 years, beginning with the completion of the substantial rehabilitation as determined by the city's Community Development Department and conditioned upon the property owner granting to the city at the time of substantial completion a covenant ensuring that the structure shall be maintained and used in a manner that furthers the public benefits for the period of the tax relief, to be recorded at the Cheshire County Registry of Deeds at the cost and expense of the property owner. Further, the committee recommends that the City Council waive the inclusion of a lien against proceeds from casualty and flood insurance claims in the covenant.
Second.
all right, it's been moved and seconded. Further discussion here? Yes, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just interested in the input from the rest of the committee on this. I know we've written in here for a period up to 5 years, and then we may add an additional 2 years of tax relief for a project that results in new residential units. Right, that results in new residential units. And this does provide 2 additional units. So I think I might be leaning more towards the 2 plus the 2, getting us to 4 as a starting point. But I'd be curious as to the thoughts of the rest of the committee.
Others? Well, I'm inclined to agree that it ought to be more than 2. And, well, 2 plus 2, I think you'd come up with an answer that I'm comfortable with. I don't know about the rest of the folks. So we need,
So I guess I'm going back to the public benefit. Attachment A, in order to qualify for the tax relief program, the proposed work must provide at least one of the public benefits. We're completely clear that it's creating another unit. But because it doesn't meet the net zero home, and it's not culturally or historically important, I guess I'm leaning toward 2.
something else?
Not first.
If you'd like to make it.
Sure. Thank you,
I
Mr. Chair.
I normally don't make motions
Yeah.
as the chairs.
I do think I saw maybe a couple head nods here. I think my point is the base that I would probably allot for this would be 2 years. The fact that it's creating 2 additional units to me gets right because it's not just 1 additional unit. If I'm not correct, it's at least 2 are being created here. So I think it qualifies for the up to an additional 2 years of tax relief myself. So I will move to amend the motion to change it to 4 years instead of 2 years.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Further discussion on the amendment? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. So, we are now ready for the main motion. Ready? He's already made the motion, and seconded. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure we've got everything in. Yes, ma'am?
I have a boring topic to talk to you about, so if you have other conversation, go ahead. But I want to talk about the last sentence in this motion regarding a lien on flood and casualty insurance. So, you may recall, for Councilor's been here a couple of years, that we've had at least 1, maybe 2 instances of previous property owners who were granted 7090E relief coming in to ask for us to subrogate our covenant because that specific phrase in the covenant was difficult for them to get financing. In the statute, it puts it squarely within your discretion to require it or not. In order to help future covenant holders, the relief recipients, to not have to go through a council process to get that subrogated, we're going to start recommending that you waive it from the jump. And I believe even my predecessor in looking at these said that it's not something we would want anyway, because if we did get those proceeds, it would be our obligation to complete the project, which is not something operationally we're looking to do.
All right, so we're going to amend it again?
No, the motion's already in there. I just wanted you to know what you're doing.
All right, very good. All right, all those in favor? No one's opposed, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Next item is item number 3 relating to the wage schedule.
Hello again.
Hi.
Typically, our HR director will talk about when we adjust these schedules, but it's my department and I'm here, so I'm happy to talk to you about it. You'll see that the action in front of you is an ordinance to add legal assistant under S13. As I've mentioned to you a couple times before, the paralegal in my office is heading towards retirement, and in anticipation of hiring a replacement, the job we're looking to fill is going to be a legal assistant. The current paralegal has 2 decades of experience here, so that title has captured a lot of experience. For this job, it's going to be more entry level, and this provides us to open it up to more candidates who can start with us.
Thank you. Questions here? It's your turn.
I got one of the easy ones.
Move to recommend the adoption of ordinance O-2026-12.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Next item, Public Works Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, councilors. For the record, Brian Ruff, City Engineer. Your next agenda item is the request for the execution of a change order for construction services with Lakes Region Fuel Systems for the Martell Court Fuel Tank Replacement Project. Essentially, when we were doing the sewer force main, bypass sewer force main project, we included that scope of the project in that design. What we identified sort of early on, our consultant identified as some concerns they had with doing the design and information they didn't really have an intimate knowledge of. So it didn't really seem like a good fit to have them continue with that scope of work. In consideration of that, the Assistant Public Works Director, Aaron Costa, and Christian Tarr and I discussed the possibility of having Lakes Region come in and do the design and permitting necessary for the fuel tank system, since they had an intimate knowledge with both our previous system, our temporary system that we're using now for fuel tank, and essentially the fuel systems within the wastewater treatment facilities. So they seem like the right fit. I'd estimate, based on what we and Wright Pierce talked about, savings of about $40,000 in engineering services to have Lakes Region perform the design and get that approval for us for that tank system. So essentially what we're asking for now is, since we gave them the design contract, we're now asking to execute a change order to have them install that tank. They've given us a price for that, which we're using as a not to exceed. That's a worst case price of $150,000. That's roughly $20,000 less than our independent estimate, which we do in the engineering division. So we know it's a good competitive price. There's also another level of savings that the city will incur, because right now the temporary tank that we're using for the facility would be removed by Lakes Region as well. So instead of mobilizing two different contractors to perform work in the same location, just makes sense all around. It's the most cost-effective and efficient option to the city to have Lakes Region finish the installation on the project. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any at this time.
Thank you. Questions? In that case, a motion, please.
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a contract change order in the amount not to exceed $150,000 for construction services with Lakes Region Fuel Systems as part of the Martell Court Pump Station Fuel Tank Replacement Project 32JM008B.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, so all in favor? No one's opposed, unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Your next agenda item is a little confusing. We're going to talk about three different projects, so if you have questions, feel free to ask. Don't be bashful. So the first project is the Court Street Sewer Force Main Inspection Project. So essentially, we built that into the CIP, allocated and appropriated funds for that project to be able to assess the force main to see if there was a need to replace it immediately, if there's an immediate concern with that force main, given it was the only infrastructure performing that work for the city. As we progressed with that project, as we awarded that, we were also awarded a congressional earmark for funding of that project. So essentially, we had two sources of funding, and the earmark didn't cover all of the engineering services that were performed based on the price that we received. So there was some leftover city funds as part of that project. So that's one project. We have leftover funds, unused. The reason that they're unused is we received a congressional earmark on that. Second project is the Island Street reconstruction project. So we finished that project in June of this year. At the completion of that project, on the adjacent street during normal operating cleaning of the sewer main, 15-inch sewer main on Pearl Street, a collapse of that main was identified. A large concern it takes an extreme lot of sewer in that area. It's essentially a very large tributary for the city, so a big concern that was collapsed and an issue. So what we did is we immediately requested pricing for 3 contractors that we had working in the city to minimize the costs associated with that work. Ultimately, it ended up being the Island Street contractor SUR who provided the best price. We had them expedite and complete that work as part of that. So since that work is complete, we know the exact costs based on their flagger hours, everything, materials that went into doing that work, the limit of work, bypass pumping, everything detailed down to the last cent on that exact amount. So we know the exact cost for that work, and what essentially we're asking as part of this request to utilize that Martel Court unspent money for the force main inspection and pay SUR for the repairs that they have performed on that sewer main. I realize it's a little confusing, jumps around all over the place, but happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Questions here? All right. Whose turn is it?
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to reallocate $50,000 for the sewer force main inspection project 32 MIOM10222 to the Island Street Sewer Improvement Project 32 JM10224.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion by the committee? Seeing none, all in favor? No one's opposed, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Your next agenda item we talked about a month ago. It's related to the lower Winchester Street change order with McFarland Johnson for right-of-way services for that project. So we did get a definitive response from DOT. If you recall, at the last meeting, there was a request that they pay for 100% of the right-of-way costs. They respectfully declined. Wasn't really a surprise. They also reminded us that the project started at about $7 million and now is closer to $16 million, and they will continue to fund the project at 80%. So I think all in all, they're being very fair with us. I think last time maybe I was a little more passive in my discussion of this. I think although the construction date is set, what seems like further out, I think there's no guarantees with federal money and federal projects. And right now we're allocated to receive this money. DOT's agreed to pay these funds. I think it behooves us to move forward on this and get that done. The bridge certainly needs to be replaced as soon as possible, and if we can't move construction of the entire project up, we will look to move the bridge up. But in a perfect world, we do all that project at once and expedite getting that done. So the right-of-way acquisition period is anticipated to take about 2 years, which is a long time, so we want to execute this and move this forward as soon as possible. We don't need to reallocate any additional money at this time. It's already been allocated as part of the planned construction, so any additional monies that we may need to go to construction can be done as part of the CIP update as far as allocating for that project. So no need to allocate additional monies. We have it already allocated for this project, the city's match for this change order. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
I don't have a question. I just want to thank Brian and Public Works for pursuing the question. We knew it was a long shot, but I appreciate the effort just the same.
Good job by all. All right, motion please.
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to execute a contract change order in an amount not to exceed $1,338,000 for engineering services with McFarland Johnson as part of the Lower Winchester Street 40666 Reconstruction Project 75J0026A.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? No one's opposed, unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
The assessor rejoins us.
Good evening, Dan Lindell, City Assessor. So last time I was here before you, we discussed all of our exemptions and credits. And as a result of that discussion, you directed us to come up with new resolutions implementing the recommended changes. So I think we can go through most of these pretty quick. I'll obviously answer any questions along the way. We'll take one at a time. We do need to vote on them independently. There's a couple that I'll highlight when we get to them. But the first resolution is R 2026-25. That's dealing with the deaf or severely hearing impaired. We adjusted that amount from $33,000 to $55,000. And we also adjusted the income and asset limits for this one, for the elderly and for the disabled, all at the same rate. We went from the assets for the single from 61 to 75, from married to 87 to 110, and for the income, single 32 to 40, and married 43 to 60. So this new resolution has all those changes in it. Right. The next one is the blind. That's our 2026-26. The copy you have in front of you may say the deaf or severely hearing impaired. That has been changed, so it is a blind. And we went from 18,000 to 30,000 on that one. All right. Next, elderly. This is all one resolution, but in this we deal with the 3 different age classes, the 67 to 74, 75 to 79, and the 80 plus. For the first category, we changed it from 33 to 55. The second category, 45 to 75, and the third one is 60 to 100,000, and increasing the asset and income limits as well. So the next is the disabled. We increased that one from 33,000 to 55,000. That's R28. Next one is the solar, wind, and wood. These are all incorporated into one resolution. The main reason why we're bringing this before you is for the solar, and that's the readoption allows us to provide this benefit for systems that are off the grid or net metered. So what it is any increase in value, we give them an exemption for that same amount, so it zeroes it out. And that's resolution 29. Okay. Next, we're going to get into the credits. First one is the optional veterans credit. We went from 300 to 450 on this one. The next is the all veterans tax credit. This has to equal the first one, so whatever you decide for the optional veteran credit, this one must equal it. So this is also 300 to 450. So the next one is the service-connected disability. I do want to provide a correction on this. I think I'd indicated during our discussion that the max was 4,500. It's actually 5,000 in the statute. It did recently change. So in this resolution, I did go with my recommendation at that point, which was 4,500. Council has the option to increase it all the way up to 5,000. I think my recommendation is consistent with the other 2 credits, but you do have the option to change it further if you want. I also want to point out that we did deal with this credit earlier in the year. We increased it from 4,000 to 4,300. So this one you will need to suspend the rules to increase it again. Okay. And then last we have the optional tax credit for combat service. Councilor Lake had brought this up during our last meeting. This one's it's a little more complicated than I was expecting it to be. It's specifically for New Hampshire National Guard or Reserve component of the U.S. Armed Forces that are serving during combat duty. The credit is only provided during the time of the combat duty. We actually can prorate it if that duty ends. So there's a little bit more logistics of us tracking that term of when they're being on duty and stuff, and there's a number of things we'll be looking for that. They get this instead of the vet credit, so most likely if they're getting the veterans credit, they would not be applying for this anyway. We looked at a number of communities that have adopted this, which are a few in the state, and there isn't one credit currently being given out, so I don't know what the demand is for this. You can't get both, and yeah, other than that, I did put it at $450 to match our current veterans credit. You can go up to $500, so there's flexibility if the council chooses to adopt this and the amount.
So for this one, the new one
Yep.
that we're addressing, you're on active duty. whether you're, in order to qualify, you need to be on active duty.
So in order to qualify for active duty, we actually need to be designated by the President in an executive order or the Department of Defense in a direct sustainment of military operations in a combat zone. We do need to see their military orders in order to
Right.
apply this.
Yeah, okay. The last one. the new one. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any complications for current service people? They have been directed by the president, but it's not authorized by Congress. We don't have to worry about that because they've been directed by the president?
I'm going to defer to our city attorney. I don't know about that. I mean, that's.
Could you say that again?
Most, supposedly, an act of war is declared by Congress, but in this case, just the president has sent off our soldiers to be in combat. I think you said it was by the president's determination, so we're good?
Difficult question to answer. There's a few different contexts where that distinction might matter. I believe probably federal funding would be one of the main points of argument of what is authorized and what's spending during the time of active war or not. I'm not sure in this context that distinction is going to be critical.
I can give you the answer to that. The President of the United States has the authority to call up to 250,000 reservists at National Guard at his or her whim at any time and deploy them any place worldwide without constituting war, but can be in the combat zone.
And one of the key words that I'm seeing in this statute is combat. It's
Yep.
combat service.
Correct.
All right, so we need to pass these. And we have the opportunity to give our friend to my right
I would like
the
to be,
ability to recuse himself.
I would like to accuse myself from Resolution 32.
Anybody have a problem with that? No? Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, this is the total
Jay Kahn,
disability.
17 Mountain View Drive in Keene. So, and I actually got a question on this on radio show this last week. But number one, I think these changes, the definitions in here are all income qualified. So this is not just a blanket for anybody who has a visual or hearing impairment or other kinds of age qualification or otherwise. There's an income qualification that's significant and to any kind of tax break. I wonder how often this is used by people that might actually qualify, and that's on them to have to come forward. There is a typo on page 37 here that I think is significant in the resolution, and it is around the $100,000 for a person 80 years. There's a zero missing, just a Scribner correction. And finally, I just, maybe I missed a conversation the last time that you spoke about this, but the rate of change on a couple of these, I can anticipate the question that I'm going to get. How did we determine going from 33 to 55 or 18 to 30? There's some basis for it, and it's not present in the materials. If the assessor could address that, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so during our last meeting, we did discuss that, and we are going through evaluation, and what we're seeing now for the residential properties, we're not done, but we're looking at an increase of at least 60%, in the residential properties. So we applied that to these exemptions to bring them up to what people are currently getting on their homes. At least that was the attempt.
Okay. Further discussion? All right. You want to vote on each and every one of these? Who's next? You next? Okay.
Ready?
Go right ahead.
Move to recommend the adoption of Resolution R-2026-26.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor? No one's opposed? Thank you.
Move to recommend the adoption of Resolution R-2026-27.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor? Thank you.
Move to recommend the adoption of Resolution R-2026-28.
Second.
All in favor? No one's opposed. Thank you.
Move to recommend the adoption of Resolution R-2026-29.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Move to recommend the adoption of Resolution R-2026-30.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you.
Move to recommend the adoption of Resolution R-2026-31.
Second.
All in favor?
Move,
Go ahead.
move to suspend Section 33 of the Rules of Order to act upon Resolution R-2026-32.
Second.
Okay, on the motion to suspend the rules, all in favor? All opposed? Make the change.
Oh,
You ready?
what's that?
You're right for this one, right?
Yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep. Move to recommend the adoption of Resolution R-2026-32.
Second.
All in favor? No one's opposed. Go ahead.
Move to recommend the adoption of Resolution R-2026-33.
Second.
All in favor? No one's opposed. Unanimous.
Mr. Chair, I do believe you skipped 25, the first one.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Oh, it's up under here though, yeah.
Yep. Good catch. Move to recommend the adoption of Resolution R-2026-25.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you, Assistant.
You got them all?
Or Deputy, sorry.
Fiscal policies.
I'm going to give Rebecca a break and start, because she's been doing, so just to explain, Rebecca has been helping to put this together in the finance director's absence. And one of the things she did was give page numbers and do some reformatting to this, which was awesome and very much needed, because you will remember when we were discussing potential changes, it was difficult to track. And so this, I think, is very helpful. And so tonight, I want to go through the changes we discussed at your workshop, which was held on June 30th. They were about outside agency funding, fund balance, the land use tax allocation, the CPI index update, a capital plan clarification, and ambulance billing rates primarily. So the first one is on page 2 of 14, and it's related to outside agency funding. So here there are two changes. One, instead of outside agencies, it says social service agencies, and then it changes the committee that reviews the applications by removing community development from the committee. So just to pause on this one for a little bit. I'm really less concerned about the language in the fiscal policy. The real difference is made in the process and the application and how we review the applications that we receive. And so I was talking earlier about, looking at how we might be able to clarify some of the language, the purpose behind this process, and who might qualify. And I did spend a little bit of time after talking extensively with Councilor Tobin today, who was great to help me kind of work through some of these things. And I gave you just a draft of outside agency funding evaluation potential guidelines that we could use, and this is just a draft. And again, this is not something that needs to be in the fiscal policy, and I really am less concerned about changing outside agency to social service agency. We can leave it at outside agency as long as we do the definition in the application and clarify it in the review process. And so as part of that, I looked at creating a purpose statement which would talk about this funding is intended to support nonprofit organizations that serve as partners in delivering services that complement the city's human services and welfare responsibilities. Historically, the city has focused on organizations that provide essential services to Keene residents, which in the absence of those services could reasonably increase demands on municipal resources or require a greater level of city intervention. And so that kind of goes to the application that we've used in the past, where we ask the applicant to talk about the services they provide, and there's an evaluation and discussion about whether or not the city would be required to provide that and whether we're referring people to that organization. But that doesn't really tell the whole story. So the next part, I was trying to draft a purpose statement to be a little bit broader, but still keep the focus. And so the committee may also consider other nonprofit organizations that address significant human service or community needs affecting Keene residents when those services provide a demonstrable public benefit consistent with the intent of this program. In evaluating requests, the committee should consider the extent to which an organization's services benefit Keene residents, complement the work of the city's Human Services Department where applicable, leverage other funding sources, and provide measurable public value through prevention, intervention, and other essential human services. So if you think about an organization, and this doesn't currently happen, but the Serenity Center provides services, and that may fall more into the prevention or intervention. And so there could be some additional talk about or conversation about whether or not that was an application you would look to fund. And so what really is important is how you might then score it, what is included in the actual application. So tonight, what I am proposing is that the only change I really need is to remove the community development from the committee. It can remain outside agencies, and that we continue to have this conversation. And what I would like to do is go back to the committee who last reviewed the applications and talk about this structure and refine it even more so that we can come to an agreement on what we're looking, to accomplish with the funding. In my conversation with Councilor Tobin, we talked about whether or not there should be a budget number as to what's being allocated to this category of funding. And so those are the types of things we could hash out in a committee and then bring back to FOP later for further conversation. And I don't feel like it's necessary to amend your language in your fiscal policy in order to do that. So that's what I would propose for dealing with outside agencies. Next, we talked a lot about the index, and the consumer price index is really important because we use the rolling three-year average to calculate the change that's available in the budget each year. And we've changed the index that we've used a couple of times. We were using the Boston, I'm trying to remember this. Yes, Boston Cambridge we were using Boston Cambridge for a number of years, and then our finance director at the time brought back a request to change this to the New England, Northeast Region New England Index. And this year, when we were putting together the budget, our current finance director had some difficulties because it wasn't as widely available, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics has really focused more on the region-wide indexes. And so we are proposing to go with just Northeast region. And at the workshop, when we discussed this, the council asked what the difference is in terms of what were the CPI adjustments for these different indexes over the last several years. And so I did provide a comparison of that. They are relatively close. You saw, I'm sure, that they are relatively close year after year. The Boston-Cambridge one at times is actually less, which was surprising to me because I would think the Boston one would be higher. But at times it is actually less. And so what we're looking for is really just an available index that makes sense for us. And I think if you wanted to use Boston-Cambridge again, that would be okay. We're proposing the Northeast region because we think that makes the most sense for us in this region of the state. But, and that's what we have included in your fiscal policy, a change to the Northeast region. Next, there's on page 5 of 14, it's 49 in your packet, there's just some wording change related to the capital improvement program. And as I explained at the workshop, we start with the first year of the capital improvement plan to roll into the operating budget. Their processes are done at different times of the year. And so there are things that change. And so it's the starting point for inclusion, but I think every year since I've been here, there's been adjustments to that. And I highlight those changes in the budget letter and in the presentations. And so more accurately, the description we're proposing says the capital improvement program provides a starting point for inclusion in the city manager's annual operating budget preparation. So we start there with that first year, and then as we put together the entire budget and look to meet your fiscal policies, there are some adjustments that are made that are called out during the budget process. Next, right beneath that, in item K, we simply changed, and this was a recommendation from the Public Works Department, from instead of upon project completion, we wanted to use the word upon project closeout. And the reason for that is when a project is completed, is not it's not hardly ever the same time as when it's closed out. And the reason for that is because you complete a project and there's a significant amount of time that follows where bills are coming in and all of the cleanup that's happening. And so it makes more sense to use the word closeout instead of completion in relation to projects. Now, Councilor Haas did talk a little bit about this at the workshop, and he also asked a follow-up question. The project balances should be on the financial reports, the summaries that you get. And I'm not sure they've been on the most recent ones, but that is how you can track what the balance is in a project. And let's say, for instance, you were following the financial reports and you wanted to know what was left in the Island Street project. You should be able to see on that financial report the Island Street project and the balance. And then let's say 2 months later, you feel like the project should be closed out, but there's still a balance there, you're able to see that. So that is the intent for those project balances to be on the financial reports that are provided to the council on a regular basis. Next, on page 7 of 14 is designation of revenues. Now, this actually got a lot of conversation and a little bit of debate. This is related to the land use change tax and the conservation fund. And so at the workshop, what I talked about is changing the language to say we would designate up to $25,000 for conservation purposes funded through the land use change tax, But if it's less, if we get revenue that's less than that, it would just be up to that amount. So say, for instance, this year, we only received $10,000 in land use change tax. We would transfer 10. Right now, what happens is, regardless of the amount of revenue we receive, we are subsidizing it with the general fund, and we are transferring the balance, and so that it equals $25,000 a year. There was language in there that also talked about if it was higher than $25,000, 50% of that revenue would go to the land use, would go to the conservation fund. So as a follow-up to that conversation, I had questions about how many times has it been more than 25? And I think, and the information I gave you, I think it was once or maybe twice. And then, but mostly it was under 25,000. And then I received questions at the workshop about, well, what's in our conservation fund? And Councilor Haas followed up with some questions about just the details of the fund and breaking that down. And I think today, this afternoon, I actually was able to work with the finance director to get that history for you. And I'm not going to find it right here. But in the document that I provided, it shows that every transaction, so most recently it's been purchases of property for the conservation purposes on Old Gilsum Road. So there's one that's been completed and there's one that's in the works. The one that's been completed, you saw in the detail I provided, that has come out of the conservation fund. In addition to the actual purchase price of that property, the transfer costs, so any closing costs, deed registration, any of that is also charged to the fund as is related to the purchase. What's not in there yet is the current agreement to purchase additional property on Old Gilsum Road for $45,000, and so that would be deducted from our current total. And right now, in that spreadsheet that I provided, I'm also accounting for this year's transfer of $25,000 because that's currently what we have in fiscal policy at this time. So hopefully that provided a good breakdown for you. I think off the top of my head, numbers, it was just over $100,000 in the fund. We're going to spend $45,000 plus probably a couple more thousand related to the closing costs. You're going to have just over $50,000 left in the fund. And so going forward, whether or not you want to keep that number at 25 or you want to have that number that we transfer be equal to the amount of revenues is the question. The way that I have it proposed in your document is that we would only transfer the amount of revenues that we receive, up to $25,000. Next is on page 9 of 14, and it's related to our ambulance billing. So as I explained at the workshop, the law has changed related to ambulance billing, and instead of having language that specifically says what we can in fact bill, we are suggesting language that says we can bill up to the maximum allowed according to current New Hampshire state law regarding rates and limits. That will automatically address any issues that we have moving forward if the law were to change again. Further down on that same page, there's a change in language related to fees and charges. And right now, the language talks about they will be adjusted based on a schedule that I develop, and it should be at least biannually. That doesn't make a lot of sense. We really should be doing it every year as part of the budget process. We budget our revenues and our expenses, and so reviewing those revenues at the time of setting the budget makes the most sense, and it would be make sure that those numbers are kept current. And let me see. Next is on page 13 of 14, and this is related to unassigned fund balance. So this is number 3 is not your general fund unassigned fund balances, which is what we typically talk about. This is for all remaining budgeted funds. And what we are proposing is that should say we should maintain an amount sufficient to provide for estimated expenditures. And the reason for that is we have funds that we have created to buy vehicles, to pay for different things. And typically, we forecast them based on expenditures that we believe will be incurred over the next 5 to 7-ish years. And creating a fund balance that supports that is really what makes sense, instead of trying to tag it to what we do with the general fund, which is their percentage is related to the actual budget commitment. So instead, this is really tying your fund balance to your budgeted or your planned budgeted expenses for that fund. And then just below that, we're striking through the language related to self-funded health insurance, as we haven't done that in at least a decade. Those are the changes.
Thank you. Questions here? Go ahead.
Can I bring us back to page 2 of 14 or page 46? My question is, and this is back to our funding evaluation guidelines for agencies. My question is, when an organization who's wherever says, oh my goodness, I wonder if I could do this with the city, what is the document that they look to? And if it is this document, I would like to save them some time and just say social services. Because while it's gracious on your part to say, outside agency, if we're mean social services, then let's just say social services, so that they don't spend time and energy or thought in a frustrating manner. You do have the provision within this to say we can consider other non-for-profit social service, no, it's still social services. So to my mind, this draft that we have here should say social service funding evaluation guidelines, and just be straight about it.
Yeah.
Just to spare our local organizations the time and energy to understand what's a possibility and what's not.
I agree.
Fine with that?
Anything else?
Not on this topic. I was going to go back to the conservation piece. Now I forget which page it's on. Page 7 of 14 or 51 of 71. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in maybe chatting through this a little bit more. I think there was a few different ideas for maybe how we could or should fund this going forward. I think I did some math out. If we were to have done this model back to whichever year we had started with, 2016, I think it was, I think we'd be 80,000 short now, and so we wouldn't have been able to necessarily get the lots that we're going for now without moving some funds around. So I'm maybe interested in keeping it at a similar funding level, but maybe putting a cap on it, because I definitely get the idea of not wanting this to just kind of run wild if we don't go buy anything for a little bit. But with that, what maybe I'm not fully aware of is the opportunity that's still out there, because I get that at some point we would want to wind this program down because there's only so much land within the city bounds that we could buy, and I'm just wondering if you might have a perspective, city manager, on like how much opportunity is there still out there compared to maybe when we started.
That's a really hard question to answer. I don't really have a great answer for you. I can tell you that, well, I'm not going to be specific, but I can tell you that there probably are at least a couple more parcels that we'll probably want to get at some point, as it makes sense. But I guess the reason why I am proposing the change is because it fluctuates from year to year, and so it's not anything that we can plan for, and so we just have to figure out a way to work it into the budget overall. And the council always has the authority to add dollars and through a resolution if something were to come up and there wasn't enough funds. I recognize it's a lot easier to get a request through when we have the funds available, versus then saying we have this much of the purchase price, but we need more from the city council. So, I mean, I would be comfortable with the 25, but I do think that at some point you need to determine as a council what is enough, and there could potentially be some large changes. And with the language that you currently have, if you weren't to take some of my proposed changes, you're going to get 50% of what could be a pretty large number. And I'm not sure that might be I'm not sure that's the best use of the funds overall.
I do have a follow-up. Number one, unfortunately, well, they're not making any more land. I completely agree, right? We know that. But, yeah, right? Other planets. But somebody owns land that are adjacent to our natural areas, period. And if they decide to sell, then that is potentially a piece of land that we would be interested in. Sadly, those types of real estate transactions have a time-sensitive aspect. So
Yes.
while I completely understand the point that the Conservation Commission could say, hey, we have this unique opportunity, if we were to limit it, we have this unique opportunity, City Council, would you please give us this money to do this? Except for the fact that we have meetings, we have schedules, there are periods of time between each of these meetings, and that may just not work in terms of the real estate process. So while I'm not clear about how and just to put a finer point on it, this $25,000 number has not changed for the entire period of time that it has been going. Reminds me a little bit of the anyway, so we are not keeping track with the increases in prices of property in general. So I do understand the point that we don't want to have too much money in there when things are so tight for abundant reasons that are above our pay grade. But I'm personally not comfortable with only the amount actually received shall be designated, because I believe it shorts our children, our community, the health of our ecosystems, because of huge issues above our pay grade. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there's some very, very valid points in there. I've been kind of going back and forth as to where I land on this one, because I definitely think there's very good value in it. It's not guaranteed funding that's going to come in, but I also recognize that a limiting factor in some fashion would make sense, and I wonder if the counselor would maybe meet in the middle of where this is, to set maybe just a cap of where or how high we would go with our city funds, at somewhere around maybe 75,000 or 100,000, where when we get to that point, we no longer contribute from the general fund, but we still, so if we drain ourselves to zero, we do, but then if we're sitting comfortable like when we were at 100,000, we don't necessarily need to continue to grow that fund.
I can do that.
So I wonder if that's.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would just love for you to explain to me one more time how you want to do that, so I could maybe come up with some language. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I think the existing language would be the base, with language that says if, how would I word this? The contribution from the city's general fund would not exceed, say, $75,000.
Can I ask a further question? So would 25,000 be the number unless revenues exceeded 25,000? And then you would say up to 75,000? So see, it's sort of a two-tier, because right now, we designate 25,000, and we wouldn't want to now annually, I don't think what you're saying, designate 75. But if it's sort of a two-tier where we leave the up to 25 or the 25, and then if revenues exceed 25, no more than 75 would be transferred in that year or something like that. Is that what you're saying?
I think my point was the total balance should not exceed 100 from contributions from the general fund.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so it would be
All
the
right.
same, each year the city shall designate and set aside up to $25,000 for conservation purposes, funded through
gotcha.
LUCT. If LUCT revenues are less than 25, only the general fund will provide the difference from general revenues to ensure an annual contribution of $25,000, provided that it does not exceed, that the resultant balance does not exceed,
Resultant balance.
say, $75,000.
Okay. Do you, yeah,
Yeah.
I know what she mean.
I think I've got it. So there is a tiny little sentence at the end of that paragraph that says balance is said sum not to exceed 500,000, which could be expanded to say of which no more than 75,000 to come from the general fund. Is that what you're getting at? The total project or the total fund balance as opposed to the annual? Or 100,000, okay.
Maybe let me word it this way, if I may. Let's say, for example, we set that cap that I've been talking about at $75,000, and our current balance is $100,000, and we have some funds come in from LUCT. Because we are at $100,000 already above that $75,000 limit, we wouldn't pull anything from the general fund. If we're at $50,000 and $10,000 comes in, we would only bring ourselves up to that $75,000. We wouldn't go above the 75 from the general fund. That was my idea for where I was trying to get to. So essentially, to limit how much we would bring in from the general fund, but still allow contributions from LUCT if it goes above and beyond.
So if the fund is at 100,000, but we got land use taxes revenue of 10, we would still transfer the 10 because it's not coming from the general fund. Okay. Gotcha. I get what he's saying. What happens when there's a large payment from a land use change tax? So a big parcel is converted and is now being used for development. And right now, the language talks about 50% of that. Would you leave that at the 50?
I would be fine in my recommendation.
Okay.
Essentially leaving the rest of the language there.
Gotcha.
So yeah,
Okay.
if it came in at 50,000, you do the 37.50. I think it is, yeah.
All right. Thank you. Laura Tobin, Center Street. So I did want to talk about outside agencies. I'll try to be brief, but I was on the committee this past year, and the problem that I felt I was running into was not knowing. So one of the questions or criteria is that the city is going to spend money on this, and that the city would save money or would otherwise have spent it, right, on whatever this is. But I kind of kept finding myself in the place where I was saying, I guess the city could spend money on that. I don't know how much the city would spend on it, and I don't know that that would be the priority. And so I was looking for something to tell me that the city, some criteria that was telling me that the city is going to spend money on this. My initial idea was actually going through and looking at the matrix on in our master plan. This has a lot of things that have to do with, and I guess I'll preface this by saying that by being in here, we've sort of said that the city is willing and plans to invest money in these things. I understand that there are also welfare needs, and I've read through that criteria as well. But I think that if it is set up in the way where it is about agencies that Human Services is referring to these, that sort of sets a little bit of a boundary there for me, I guess. I would also like to, at some point, explore the idea of aligning with some of the things that are in here. A lot of them have to do with workforce development, sustainability initiatives that we've committed to doing in the region or in our city. Partnering, there are even specific nonprofits named in here, and giving those an opportunity to apply for funding and invest in that. But I think it should be aligned with something, and I think that there should be a cap. I understand that Human Services, those are required by statute and we have to do these things. And also I'm very aware that once we give money to someone else to do that, we have no control over how they are using that funding. So that's just kind of where I'm coming from with that, and hopefully at some point we can explore that a little bit more. But maybe for that reason, I would like to kind of keep it as open in terms of calling it outside agencies, so that maybe that process can be explored separately, if that makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Counselor?
Ed Haas, 114 Jordan. I'm not sure what the intent of the committee is tonight, but there's at least 2, if not 3, issues that need wording work. So I hope you're moving to put this on more time and revisit. Thank you.
I was kind of thinking the same thing.
Yeah,
Let's put it on more time.
so can I request that, in particular, the land use change tax, that you have proposed one set of language, you are suggesting a different. Can I request that the 2 of you get together and let the committee as a whole see his language in a clearer way that we could evaluate? So definitely more time, but your 2 minds together, if that's possible, as one of the items that might need work.
Yeah, so I think what I'm planning to do is change it the way that you just explained, send it to Brian, say, did I get this right? And then insert that in here into the document. But if there are other language issues, I'd like to know about them tonight so that I don't then next time come back again.
Yeah, we've got to have a document to work with, and once again, let's remember that these are guidelines of how we operate our financial business, and certainly your suggestion and recommendation on guide sheet for social service agencies is exactly what you want to have, and be able to work it through, so by the time we come to the next budget season, you've got another guideline that you're going to use in operation. But ours are big picture, not departmental operation things. But we do have to have something to speak with, so if there are others, I guess let's hear them.
Right.
And if we come up with some more, when it comes back to us in 2 weeks, we'll get them back out and kick them around. So that's my opinion. But yes, ma'am.
What I was going to say is, I think what Councilor Lake is proposing is significant, and it requires more discussion. I would not support it, and I would be voting against the whole thing on that one point. So I think it would behoove us to put this on more time for more discussion.
Am I understanding Councilor Tobin's request to be counter to what I had suggested, that you want to leave it more open. You don't want to have it be said to just social services. So that's substantial too. And I'm open to that, whatever it is that works well. I'm just trying to make sure that we're clear to the community to not waste their time. So I'm definitely open to trying to find a way to respond to Councilor Tobin's concerns.
So in order for this to be a productive process, I need direction from the committee. So far I've got one language change, and there's going to be more conversation about that. But if there's other language in here that the audience it wants to recommend a change on, or, because otherwise we'll do this over again next time. So any additional direction from the committee?
Just for my pea brain, where did we end up here? Social service or outside agencies?
You ended at social services.
Thank you. I think that is a big step, in my opinion. It makes it fairly clear to anybody who thinks otherwise than what we actually do. And I guess, I don't know, we could discuss quite some time with this, but I think the reality is when those who wish to apply decide to do that, they've got a criteria that they get. This new revision is more an operating guideline to the staff, and it's pretty clear to those who apply where they're going to get some money. And history says we safeguard that money better than anything else, and we don't give it away.
Okay.
What's your pleasure, folks? Well, you're going to have to make a motion then.
I think it's his turn, right?
Sure.
All right.
Move to put this item on more time.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. All in favor? Nobody against. All right. With that, there is nothing else on our agenda. So a reminder that our next finance meeting is the last one of the early part of the summer.
Before the break.
So come with your plaid shirts and whatever else.
Well, Hawaiian shirt, right?
Hawaiian,
That's what they
plaid,
said.
Yeah.
You're saying